Well, there is still, I guess, a lot of unanswered questions for a lot of folks out there when it comes to the way I'm going about building my garden in these woods on this hillside in this highly dense clay soil here in the Ozarks. And I understand because I am doing things and I'm talking about things that seem to be a little out of the norm with a lot of the other people's information out there when it comes to this woodchip gardening method or back to Eden gardening techniques, and my way of showing how to turn hard clay soil into good garden soil. So the question still remains, can you grow in wood chips? Can you garden in wood chips? Well, I don't think very successfully with just wood chips alone. I'm growing vegetables in clay soil, or I'm growing vegetables in wood chips, but not individually on their own. Maybe it will give some people out there some ideas and better understanding on how wood chip gardening works, if you want to call it that. So I think it's only fair that because this channel is new, I wasn't doing videos when I started this project of developing this eventually no-till garden in the middle of the woods about 3.5 years ago. So I think because some people are keeping track of me and they want to see a little pudding, especially the naysayers, because people just can't seem to comprehend and understand why in the world this hillbilly would go and till wood chips into the soil, because you got all these people telling you about, nitrogen being robbed out of the soil. I'm going to also share a few thoughts when it comes to heavy clay. And I think I would encourage people that have heavy clay soil to be grateful and thankful. I know I am when it comes to dealing with this stuff, as opposed to what a lot of folks that have to deal with the heavy sandy soils. I much rather have the clay, and I'll explain why. So here we are I'm looking at my garden area here. The very same garden that everybody saw me tilling wood chips in for the 4th time. They're not composted wood chips. They are not fully composted down by any means. So let me turn you around here. What I have here is about 4,000 square feet, a little over 4,000 square feet. I guess you could almost call it a wood chip raised garden bed. When you take a look, because you see these logs down at the bottom, it's not intended to be a raised garden. These things are down here between each post and my garden beds on the outside perimeter of the fencing. It's used to create beds, but primarily for water control. I don't want everything to wash away because I am on a hillside. And so we'll do a quick little update. I guess I need to do this every now and then. But I do want to document some things so that people can kind of have a better feeling of what I'm saying is actually working and true for my experience. So let's take a look here. There's obviously green foliage all over the place, and you can probably already tell that there's some flowering. All the plants that I do have out here, which are scattered, so I got an indication of what's going on in various parts of the garden. They were all started by seed in my little $10 greenhouse that I shared with people on a video. And then they all got transplanted out here about 2 weeks ago. These plants are getting hit pretty hard this year with the cucumber beetle and the flea beetle. And actually 2 days ago I found my first Mexican bean beetle. I've never had a Mexican bean beetle in my gardens before, but I found my first one. And you got to wonder, if there's one, there's got to be more. But I haven't seen any more, and I hope I don't. But the cucumber beetles and the flea beetles have really been heavy for me this year, starting out. And these things have only been out here for a couple weeks, these plants here. So I'm gonna have to deal with that. These plants right here, these are tomato. I think they're mortgage lifters. I did end up losing one of those on transplant, after transplant. Here we got some zucchini plants. I intended for 4. They're looking okay, with the exception of the flea beetles and the cucumber beetles hitting them pretty hard. But we got some flowering going on here, and we actually got fruiting going on. I'm assuming you can see that right here. And there's some more fruiting going on right there. So they're doing okay, with the exception of the bug attack. Right here we have some beans. These are just some bush beans. I lost 3 of them on my transplant, but they are flowering as well and fruiting. As we look up here on these 2 panels, I intended for 4 butternut squash, and we had 100% germination on our seed starting in those little greenhouses, so I went ahead and split them up and put them down here, just so they didn't go to waste, and I wanted to see if my splitting would be successful. But we have flowering going on the butternut and fruiting already. I'm kind of surprised on the fruiting part. Boy, they just really taken off here. We got more fruiting and flowering going on in here. Same with over here, flowering. We got fruiting. I think there's some more fruiting there. A lot of fruiting going on. So that's what we got. So we're going to end up with 8 butternuts for our test plants. Up in here on these 2 little panels right here and there, we have cucumber. They've already went to flowering. They look pretty rough at first, but they're pulling through. Some more comfrey on the ground. So we have flowering. I'm not seeing evidence of fruiting yet. But anyway, we pull up here on these 2 panels. I intended for 4 cantaloupes, and I was going to go ahead and train them up on these panels. I lost 1 on transplant, after transplant, and then behind there, of course, I split up the other 3 on transplant coming from these. Back here is a single watermelon. I should have doubled them, but a single watermelon. But we had so much watermelon last year, I thought I'm gonna take it easy. But it's pulling through after this bug attack and doing some flowering. Up through here, this little row here, this is sunflower. I've never grown sunflower in my life. The one up here on the end, it got snapped. It's not going to make it. I just propped it up there with a piece of wood. I don't know what I was thinking, but he ain't going to make it. So we'll try our luck at sunflower. And there's a reason I want these sunflowers in here, or something similar. Last year I grew popolo in here, and I'm going to touch on that popolo in a minute. More comfrey coming up. This will be pulled up out of the garden as well. Back here, this is a split off of one of these. I believe that one. This is acorn squash. It is also gone to flower, and the growth is just going kind of nuts on me. But we got fruiting going on as well, and I think there's some more fruiting somewhere I thought I saw. And this one here, I didn't think it was going to make it through the transplant, but it's pulled through after I hit it with a little more homemade liquid fertilizer. Got a video that I just recently done on that. So after we tilled it, the intent was to solarize. I've talked about that before. I'm a big fan of that, and I have big heavy tarps, which are basically roadside billboards, but they're tough and they're built for the elements. and I had the whole garden covered to solarize. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to do that for approximately 2 to 3 months. The plan was that I was going to solarize until about June 1st. Due to the heavy rains, tornadic activity that we've had in the area, and the high winds this spring, things didn't go as planned. The winds come up here in these woods, even though I got all these trees surrounding me. When it drops down in here and swirls around, it just basically ripped my tarps up. And I stake my tarps up with 3/8" rebarb, or stake them down with that, using the eyelets that you put in them, and even the Gorilla Tape. It didn't make no difference. It got pretty nasty up here for a little bit. So here's my 3/8" rebarb. They're about 30 inches long. I've already taken all the ripped eyelets and stuff and cleaned them up. And what it has done, it bent the rebarb. That's how strong the winds came. So I took 2 of the tarps that were still usable, and I tarped, put them back on the garden down there on the end in that dark spot that you see down there. And I went ahead and pulled those up about 4 days ago. And then about 2 days ago, I went ahead and tilled it in. And this was the initial plan from this winter. Lots of wood chips in this stuff. I continued to till it into the ground. And I'm utilizing the wood chips just like I explained before. If I had a handful of wood chips, how much leaves and other matter, pine needles or straw, is it going to take to equal the mass density of all them wood chips? I get more bang for my buck in the wood chips. Not to mention to collect that stuff in my woods, because I'm trying to do things self-sustainable. I am not a box store gardener. I'm trying to do things from my own property to the best extent possible, for cost reasons and for freedom and self-dependency and self-reliance, surviving, living, all right, without having that dependency on outside sources as much as I can. Because I've said it before, where there's great dependencies, there's great potential for enslavement. And that's the type of guy I am. So I hope that helps to explain why the wood chips. I get more carbon bang for my buck out of the wood chips. I have no issues feeding this wood chips, feeding the plants, feeding this 4,000 square foot, because I don't have to pay for that extra feeding of doing so. You know, kind of like the difference between feeding your 220-pound 17-year-old son that's playing on a high school football team in comparison to your 40-pound 5-year-old daughter. Which one is going to rob or deplete the refrigerator, the nutrients and food within that refrigerator, more? And which one costs more? Well, it doesn't have to be so, because I have literally thousands of dollars worth of organic, natural, liquid, biodiverse fertilizer concentrate behind that carport over there. I've shown that. That's the relevancy. So my plan this year, I do not intend to bring any more leaves, pine needles, wood chips, or anything. And the reason I'm not doing so is because my pace of bringing organic material in here, to include the wood chips, has outpaced the decomposition process, and it has exceeded the limits of my tiller. And the whole point of that tiller is to get down to that clay surface and mix all this stuff up together. But here I am digging up, trying to dig up with my pick and shovel and so forth in that spot there. This here, I got flotation sand coming from all the or erosion from all that water coming down off the hillsides through here. But I was digging in that, and then up here, the other spot, you should seen me picking and choosing on that. And people know what red clay looks like. But this whole open area here that I have cleared out in order to put these carports and shop and this garden area is this solid clay surface. Well, that doesn't make for a good garden soil or a foundation, right? I think we can all agree upon that. But let me walk over here into my developing greenhouse and show you what a lot of people think is a good garden soil. And this is what's going to bring us up to the importance of that clay. Everything I got going on out in that garden, I have going on in here. But if you've ever seen that Back to Eden gardening documentary with Paul Gautschi and other people's videos, especially in their raised beds, what you see people do sometimes, and they'll take their hands and they'll just run it down in there, right? And they take a look at that stuff and think, oh wow, that is just wonderful, beautiful stuff. That's the best garden soil you can have. Well, it is beautiful stuff. There's no doubt about it, and it's mine, and you can't have it. And this is what I got right here going on in my garden. And once I realized it, I knew I had to correct it. I don't want this sitting on top of that clay surface. As my plant is down in here, and even if I pack it down, I got my fingers spread underneath here, and my fingers represent roots. The plant grows rich and healthy and strong. The root system is healthy and strong. But here's the problem, and this is what happened to my popolo. Any significant wind comes up, the plant will just uproot. It doesn't bend, it doesn't snap and break, it just uproots and topples over with that wind because this stuff is weak. Just like big trees during a storm, when they don't break, they just get uprooted, the root ball out of that wet, saturated ground. That's the same thing that happens in the garden with my plants. And it is not my intent to stake up every single plant, because it happens with the lower plants as well. We get that ground shear, coming across here, and it wants to pull up plants. Because every single plant did just like I explained my comfrey did in that last video on how comfrey failed me. All the roots just grow wonderful and beautiful, and the plants look good. The comfrey looks good. But if it goes down and it comes close to that clay, it just takes the path of least resistance, and those roots grow horizontally. They're not taking a grip into that clay, and there's no need for them to, because they have everything they need right here until the storms come by and blow them over. So this is a weak garden foundation, and that hard clay is not a good foundation. But the mixture of both is what's going to give me a good garden foundation, and that's my objective out there. And this is why you need to be thankful that you got more of a clay soil than you do this heavy sandy soils that a lot of people, especially down south, have to deal with. It's because of its binding characteristics. Microscopically, the clay particle is the smallest particle, but it's a flat, and it's sticky. Well, that clay provides a little adhesiveness, if you will, and gives structure and strength to the soil, so that the plant roots, as they're down in here, they have something to grip onto instead of so easily just pulling out. The other benefit of that sticky characteristic and binding characteristic of the clay is that it retains the nutrients and minerals in the soil, especially that root grow zone that you have in your garden. It'll do so more so than silt, and especially more so than sand. I don't even know if sand will hang on to nutrients at all. That's why when you get heavy rains and you're doing your watering, you're going to lose more minerals and nutrients out of your garden soil if you don't have any good clay retaining it for a longer period of time. So that might turn into more fertilization. Hope that makes sense. Well, why not just bring in already composted stuff? I get that. But when I started this garden build and cleared this area here so I can establish a garden, I didn't have all the composted stuff that I have now. And I got a lot of compost right now. But I didn't have that when I started out. And in order to bring it in otherwise, like if I had had it hauled in for me, paying for it, and I were to haul in about 26 square yards of already broken down organic or natural compost, that would give me about a 2-inch coverage on this 4,000 plus square feet. and I'm looking for that 8 to 10 inch grow zone to develop. Well, 2 inches, let's say I just get an 8-inch grow zone, and I got 2 inches, and that leaves me with 6 inches of hard clay. That leaves me about a 70 to 75% clay ratio. It's still unacceptable, too heavy in clay. I'm looking to get somewhere in that ballpark of about 30 to 40% clay. On top of that, a square yard of organic natural compost being hauled in, I'm probably looking at somewhere between $80 and $120 per square yard. Let's say I just bring in 25 square yards, I'm over $2,000, and I still have a problem in too high of a clay ratio in my grow zone for this garden. So that's why I don't do that. But I'm trying to explain to people to give a little bit more precise information if I can, and show some results. That's what I plan on doing. And I just recommend don't listen to everybody saying that you can't do this. Hey, I was told several times I'll never be able to have a real garden up in these woods. I was told you can't till wood chips into the soil. Just think about this stuff and don't listen to the fluff and puff, people just trying to make content, and get views. That's not what I'm here for. I'm not trying to be a full-fledged gardening channel, okay? But gardening is part of our 3-basket way of living, having some redundancy, being responsible, being intentional, providing ourselves a little bit more independence, and release ourselves from the dependency on outside sources. I'm not going to try to fool you into anything that I'm doing up here. I am doing what I say I am doing. I'm pretty excited about how this is going to turn out. I see it. I have the faith. I've had the faith from the very get-go. It's like I was telling my wife, you got to have faith in what you can't see. You got to see it up here and in here, because all the provisions are given to us as promised, and we just got to learn to work with it. Listen to the provider and not the corporate dictators. I hope that helps folks out there to have a little bit better understanding of why I'm doing what I'm doing. Why am I making the claims that I'm making? If you ask me, I'll tell you. You can do what I'm doing, and if I can do it in these tough conditions, I think the only people that might have a little bit tougher is those folks that have to deal with that highly concentrated sandy soils, and they don't have the resources provided around them. They would have to haul it in from 50 miles or 100 miles away, which can be costly. I got it better than they do. So I do have a little sympathy and compassion for those that don't have the clay. Be grateful for the clay. Clay is not the enemy. If it's solid clay, not good. But neither is compost sitting on top of clay either. That's not good for a good foundation. Hope you got something out of it. Sorry I got long-winded. Please pass along and share with other folks. Have a nice day. May all your branches become full of fruit. And I'll catch you next time. Hoorah!